Hello and good morning to you, my beautiful internet apprentice folks. I'm Morgan Donner, and today I wanted to share with you a somewhat new to me finger loop braiding technique. Now, I have covered finger loop braiding before, a slightly more complex pattern, but today I wanted to show you a new technique that I had learned, and I'm really excited about, not only because I feel like it gets really nice results, but also it's fairly beginner friendly, which I hope you guys will enjoy. For those of you that are unfamiliar with finger loop braiding, it is a form of braiding that involves several different loops that you hook onto your fingers. Finger loop braiding, and it is one of the most documentable styles we have of medieval braiding technique because it is explicitly written out in a manuscript, which is kind of unheard of for a lot of the different textile techniques that we try to use and replicate today. So for today's finger loop braiding adventure, you're going to need just a couple things. A bit of thread or a yarn to braid, and something sturdy to braid against. You can use a clasp like I have done here on the end of my table, or you could use the doorknob of a table, the doorknob of a table? The doorknob of a door, the leg of a sturdy table, or some other non-moving object. You can even use your own feet, as long as it's something that's a little bit far away from you and isn't going to move. Next, we're going to take 5 even loops of our thread. I find that it's easiest to do that around the free hanging edge of a counter or a table. You just wrap it around 5 times, and once you have completed the 5th round, tie your 2 ends together so that it's nice and taut against the table. You'll have 5 perfectly even loops that way. Next, you're going to take a smaller length of thread from your thread spool and make a smaller loop. Just tie the ends together. Then we're going to use that bit of thread to tie a lark's head knot around the end of the first 5 sets of loops. And I like to do that at the point where I had to tie the knots together for the loops. That way the knot is at the end of my braid and I don't have to worry about a weird knot in the middle of my braid somewhere. Toss that small loop over whatever sturdy object you had set up earlier. Okay, so now I have my 5 loops and I am standing in such a way that they are comfortable to reach. Now, a quick thing to mention is that every time I have ever taught or been taught a braid in the finger loop fashion, it has always been with the hands like this, with the palms facing each other, and you're manipulating the loops, passing them in between one another. And the new technique that I saw recently from Medieval Garments Reconstructed discusses how to do a hands down technique, and I was a little bit dubious, but it actually turned out to be super easy, and I actually really feel like I got a more tight and even braid out of it. Your mileage may vary, but I'm excited enough that I wanted to share it with you guys in a video. So we take our 5 loops and we're going to put 2 on one hand, 3 on the other. It matters not one single bit whether you do 2 on that side or 2 on this side. Either way works just fine. We're actually going to start with palms down, so I'm still holding onto my strings though. And then using my index finger as the working finger, the one that is going to be picking up the new loop for me, I'm going to go down through the first one, then up, down through the second one, then up, and then I'm going to pick up that 3rd braid. Between each of your loop transitions, make sure that you're spreading the loops so that the end where the braiding is happening is getting tightened between each new braid. So now we have 2 on this side and 3 on this one. Walk these braids down so that they are on the middle 2 fingers here. And then now this index finger is going to be our pickup finger. We're going to go down through the first loop, down through the second loop, and then pick up this 3rd loop. Walk them over so that they are on the middle fingers again, and then new index working finger, down through the first loop, down through the second loop, and then pick up the third loop. And then walk these over. Another way to think of it that I have found very helpful is I think of it as weaving my finger. So I'm going over this first string, under the second string, over this first string, under the second string. Kind of weaving your finger in and out like you would for weaving fabric. Walk the threads down so that they are on your middle fingers. New working finger, down, down, pull through. Walk them over, down, down, pull through, walk them over. Sorry that it's getting slightly out of frame here. These are wool threads, so they are stretching ever so slightly as I keep going. If you had a stronger linen or silk thread, then this would probably be less of an issue. Another thing to be aware of is that my thread here, again, wool, is not the strongest, so not only is it stretching, it's also prone to breaking, as I have already tested, and I recommend being very ginger and careful. You want to pull your threads apart and keep some tension on them, but not too much. If you ever want to put your threads down, then I recommend putting them down in the same position that you're holding them. In this case, it's kind of palms down. And you want to keep your loops distinct so you know exactly what to pick up whenever you come back to these. So as long as this table remains undisturbed, then we should be okay. So just keep doing this forever and ever and ever. Weaving, weaving my strings, Fingerloop braiding. So, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, if you're not careful, your string can break. So my middle string just broke on me. Well, I guess I'm done with this particular length of thread. I can tie these strings back together, but then this one loop is a different length than all the rest of them, which makes it trickier to do what I'm doing. I'll give it a try. Let's see if I can make it work. Okay, so here's my two little ends. I don't know if you can see it from way over there, but I'm gonna try and tie them together while still giving myself as much room as possible. Yeah, you can see that my middle finger there is not able to go as long as the other two, but that actually might kind of work. I'll give it a try. I guess it's not that bad. I'm trying to be very, very ginger with my pulling of my threads though. I definitely recommend, if you're going to give this a try yourself, do not use wool thread or yarn. I'm using wool because the extant garment that I am attempting to kind of reproduce uses wool for its Fingerloop braids, but do not recommend. So I'm not sure that this method of Palmsdown is any easier than the method that I learned at first, the palms together, but I think it is, at least for this particular stitch, a little easier than the usual, because the exact same version of this stitch already exists in the manuscripts that we mentioned earlier. So it starts off very similar with the 3 threads on one, 2 threads on the other, but instead of going through these on the 3 strand side, what you're going to do is go through these first 2 by sort of tucking your fingers down so that your index can go inside of them, and then pick up that 3rd string. The result is the same, but I do feel like that tucking motion here is a little bit trickier for some people. And weirdly, I felt like I got a much more consistent string, consistent braid with using this Palmsdown method. I'm actually kind of curious to try and translate some of the other methods, some of the other braids to this style and see if I get similar results. It could be that just something about this, ergonomically works better for me, and that's why I'm having better results. I tried this method versus the traditional version of this one in a few different thread types, so it's not specifically wool, specifically cotton, specifically silk, like no, across the board. I seem to be able to get a much more uniformly nice and tight braid all the way from the beginning to the end, whereas before I've always had a lot of problems with the start of the braid being, unfortunately, a bit loose looking, and the end of the braid as it gets closer and closer to me and I have more kind of torque or force on my threads here, I'm able to get a much tighter weave as I get closer. In fact, I have to almost sort of try to not let it get, nice and tight as it gets closer to me, because it's so noticeably different than whenever you start out. Now, the braid is still very functional either way, whether it's loose or super tight, it still works just fine, but consistency is nice when you can get it. Eventually you're going to reach a point where you just kind of can't braid anymore because you don't have enough room for your fingers to manipulate the loops. I'm just about there with my little tiny loops here, and it's about time for me to go ahead and just put this down and call it done. So take your cord off of the unmovable object that you had hooked it up to in the beginning and use it for whatever suits your fancy. In my particular case, I'm going to make several more of these and use them to finish off the edge of my medieval Greenland gown, but you could also find them used on a lot of purses, a lot of purse strings, both as the tying element to cinch your purse closed, as well as the hanging string element of a purse. There are still some extant purses around with what looks to be Fingerloop Braid as the cordage for them. These are also really great to use as lacings for dresses, although you'll probably want a longer length than we made here today, and you're also going to want to do it out of something a little bit finer than the fluffy wool that I've used. Again, some good silk never hurts. If doing a longer braid, it is really hard to get the starting point to be nice and neat if you're by yourself, so it's great to invite a friend over to beat the cord in between each new braiding element, which means that you're not trying to do all of the work yourself. You have a friend there to help make it really nice and neat for you. So I would overall say this was a great success. I'm a pretty big fan. I'm really happy that despite breaking it at one of these ends partway through, it ended up working out okay, which is fantastic. Instead of stopping about halfway through, which is where it broke, I got several more inches of usable braid, which is fantastic. So I recommend giving it a try if this interests you at all. Once you've done this one and you think, ah, that was so fun, I need more, you should definitely also check out the previous video I did on finger loop braiding, where I did a slightly more complex braid. If you do the right color combination, then the middle of the braid alternates color back and forth, and they each look kind of like a little heart, which is so cute and wonderful. So consider giving that a try, and you guys have a great day.